Hi, I'm Sam Wilson, and I don't like idiots. Let's go ahead and get right into the episode today. Coming to you from 4,200 feet in the hills of Oregon. This is another bonus episode of the MOA broadcast. We keep these simple. We don't have the musical intro and so forth. We get right down to the heart of the matter, al grano, as they say in Spanish sometimes. And the title of today's episode is Batonning for Losers. The reply or the answer to that question may or may not surprise you, depending on whether you're a thinking person or not. If you're a thinking person, you probably already know the answer to this particular question. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into it. For those of you that don't know, what is batonning? In this context, batonning is when guys will take their knives and they will place it. They're holding the knife in their hand, and they will place the edge into a piece of wood that they want to split. And they will hammer or pound on the spine of the knife with a wooden mallet, a club, a hammer, whatever they have available, to basically drive the knife through the piece of wood that they want to split, to split it wide open. Now, they may be doing this to reduce the size, the diameter of the wood. They may be doing it to get to the dry wood on the inside. There may be a variety of reasons for this, but that is what the mechanics are of batonning here in the outdoors. Now, what is the problem with doing this? Well, let's do the advantages first. The advantages are you don't have to have an axe or a hatchet or a splitting maul with you out in the woods if you find the need to reduce the size of some of your firewood to process firewood. You also have the ability to get to the drier wood on the inside without having to take along extra tools or a saw or whatever else. So you kind of have that one tool option approach if you baton your wood that way. That's probably the biggest real advantage. The other benefit to some people is, for some reason, it appears to give people a lot of fun. They seem to enjoy this a lot. And on that note, let me say very clearly, if that's why you're doing it, if you just like and enjoy batoning wood for whatever your reasons are, I don't care. That's fine. Do whatever makes you happy. I truly don't have a problem with that. Not that anyone needs my approval or anything like that. I'm not your daddy. Do whatever you want and whatever makes you happy. What we're talking about today is the discussion where, if you ever spend time on some of the online forums about bushcraft and knives and outdoors and stuff, there's some people that treat batoning like it is the end-all, be-all skill. And some of it's rage bait, don't get me wrong. They're doing it to just get a big discussion and make people, some guys, though, especially boomers, again, unfortunately, they'll just lose their mind and get themselves kicked off the forum or put in timeout or whatever else because they can't handle it. And they get emotionally involved. But there are some guys who simply believe that batoning is the end-all, be-all skill of wood processing in the outdoors, especially while they're camping or backpacking or hiking, and they only have a limited amount of tools and gear with them. So the question then is batoning for losers? Well, mankind has gone a very long time without the widespread practice of batoning. If I had to guess, I would say, based on my experience in the industry and YouTube and all that kind of stuff, forums, batoning exploded kind of in popularity in the last probably between 20, 25 years or less. And a lot of this came from, like we talked about in other videos, there was a new type of video promotion going on of knives where companies and or individuals would get out there and just show what a massive, traumatic beating, what a merciless beating their knives could take and still survive. And batoning was a great skill for this. I've used it in some of my videos to demonstrate the edge durability and the quality of the build and build construction and so forth. But then people took it seriously to believe this is a skill that you simply can't survive without in the wilderness. And that is just not the case. I'll give you an example. And everybody has their opinion and everybody has their own experience. Some people simply think you can't live without it and whatever. But let me just explain this. I live in the Pacific Northwest, all right, in Oregon. I live in southern Oregon now in the high desert. I used to live closer to Portland in the gorge, near the gorge, the Columbia River Gorge. It is a temperate rainforest there. And there are a number of the videos that I've done going back a decade or so. You can see while I'm on the ground doing, making a fire or, batoning or processing firewood, that the ground and the wood that's on the ground is so soaked with water and saturated that literally logs and pieces of wood will turn to mush as you're kneeling on them. It is an extremely wet environment, okay? Now, most folks would say that's the environment you have to be able to baton. That's the only way you're going to get to the dry wood. Now, that may be true, okay? That may be true in some cases. In general, though, that's not going to be an absolute must, and I'll tell you why I say that. Excuse me. I'll tell you why I say that. For probably the last 10 years, I haven't taken a knife with me on a regular backpacking trip that had a bigger than a 4.5 to 5 inch long blade. Okay. And most of the knives I've taken were like the size of the Packlight, or it was the actual Packlight knife, which has a 3-inch blade. Okay. Of 3/32 thick stock. Now, even though I've shown in videos that knife can take a serious beating, I'd never batoned at all except for reducing the stuff that was the size of like this half the diameter of my wrist, or smaller, or the size of my thumb in diameter, to reduce that down to kindling fine, fine enough to be able to take a spark from a ferro rod. And literally hundreds of miles on the trail, I didn't do any batoning at all other than that, and sometimes I didn't even do that. So it is not true that you have to baton to be able to survive in the woods or to be able to get by. Now, if you want to do it, again, like I said, do whatever you want. I'm not your daddy. You don't have to listen to me, and you can do whatever makes you happy. That's the beauty of the massive selection of knives and gear that we have right now. But there's something you do need to understand about batoning if you're not familiar with this. Steel, like almost all materials, has, for lack of a better term, it has a memory. Okay? And the more you beat on that steel, especially if you're really laying into it, like you're splitting stuff that is either knotty or it is very, very dry or hard, and it is giving you a hard way to go, what you are doing is you are using up the ductility, for lack of a better word, the flexibility of that steel and its ability to spring back to its original form and not either take a permanent set or a bend or break. The simple fact of the matter is, due to the way most knives are heat treated, which is on the higher end of the Rockwell scale for impact tools, the more you baton on that knife, sooner or later, especially if you're really getting into it, it is going to break. It's only a matter of time. Okay? And in that sense, batoning is for losers, because if you do it long enough and hard enough, you are going to lose that knife. It's just the way that it is. Now, some people are going to say, well, I've been batoning for years and I never had a knife break on me, or I beat this thing through so many logs and it's still going strong, blah, 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 blah. Guys, that doesn't mean anything. You have to understand, this is not just me talking here. You got to understand how sample sizes work in scientific testing. Whenever I test a knife here in the shop to find out what's going to happen with this particular edge geometry, or what's going to happen with this particular hardness of the steel, or the combination of all of those factors combined with the edge thickness behind the edge before sharpening, if you just do a sample size of 1, it means almost nothing. You may have got the best or the worst possible iteration of that knife and the accompanying parameters, and it may last forever or not, or it may break very quickly or very early in the testing. You won't really know unless you have multiple test samples. Okay? So saying that I beat on this knife to death and I split, I don't have the 30-aught core of wood with it and blah, blah, blah. That doesn't mean anything. You may have got the very best one. It may be a knife that is designed very well to batoning, or very well suited, I should say. Maybe a softer hardness or whatever else. The higher hardness blades are going to give you problems because sooner or later they are generally the ones, depending on the steel type and other factors as well, but they are typically the ones that are going to give you problems because they don't have as much flexibility. When they reach their elastic limit, you're going to hear a tink and the blade's going to go flying one way and the handle's going to go flying the other way, or a big, crescent shape is going to come flying out of the edge. Just the facts of the matter are, the more you pound on that knife, sooner or later, it's going to reach that elastic limit if you do it long enough. Now, you may stop years before that knife reaches that limit, or you may be right up to the edge when you put that knife away. If you'd have hit it one more time, it could have almost literally exploded into multiple pieces. But the bottom line is that's how it works. And if you don't believe me, take a piece of steel and sit there and bend it back and forth. The first time you bend it, it gets very difficult, right? And then you bend it back, and each successive time you bend that steel and you deform it, it gets easier and easier and easier, right? That's the same way it works with batoning. Now, I'm not telling you again, don't baton. Do whatever you want. Just be aware that if you choose to go out there and do aggressive batoning regularly or frequently, you are going to use up that knife sooner or later. Now, you may get lucky and never hit that critical mass, level of impact or trauma to that blade. But if you do it long enough, you're going to break it. The reason why axes and splitting mauls and other tools and implements like that don't have that same problem usually is because they're running a much, much lower hardness, okay? And the bottom line is the harder that steel gets, the more brittle it gets, just like glass. Glass is very, very hard, but it's also very, very brittle, right? And so you have the same kind of relationship between hardness and brittleness and so forth with steel as you do with other materials. So just keep in mind, the more you beat on that knife, the closer you're going to get. There are much better ways to do it. I prefer to split or baton, if you will, to split wood with a saw. If you've never done that before, look that technique up. It gets you almost the same exact results, but with, number one, much easier, much faster, and you don't need a flat surface on either end of the log to split it for smaller pieces, and you still get the wood split, nice clean split, and get to the dry stuff in the middle. I would also recommend, if that's what your goal is, to get to the drier wood, I went for years without batoning in the Pacific Northwest, as we call it, by simply learning how to forage and find stuff that had been off the ground and then do minor batoning. And when I say minor batoning, this is stuff where I sometimes did place the knife in there and I was able to pound it through with the palm of my hand and split the wood that way. So, like I said, again, do what you want. But just know that you are imposing those impact forces, and they do have a cumulative effect on the steel. And depending on the type of the way the knife is designed and the other, factors that are in place, you may or may not reach that critical point where it breaks sooner rather than later. So to close it up, yes, batoning is for losers because you'll lose that knife if you do it too much or too often. There you go. You do with that information what you will. That's going to do it today's episode for us. Stay safe out there, folks.